I rode my bike a lot. I loved riding my bike. I loved to take long bike rides all by myself on rarely traveled country roads with nothing but the sounds of nature around me. There was something so peaceful about being by myself. It was silent, and I always appreciated the silence. It was the beginning of spring in 1991. I was 17 years old and had decided to go for a bike ride to a park where I was hoping to catch a glimpse, or better yet, a conversation with a guy named Mark who I had a crush on. Well, I didn't run into Mark. Instead, I was hit from behind by a pickup truck. I was injured, and the man in the truck told me he would take me home. But he didn't. He took me to the woods. What happened from there is not necessary to explain, nor helpful to the imagination. But after several hours, I found myself bound. The man went to his truck to get what I believed would be my end. I sighed to myself, God, please help me. I wasn't asking him for help to get me out of this situation because I believed it wasn't possible. And after all, I wasn't too sure God would listen to me anyway. I had turned my back on him a long time ago. If anything, I was just crying out in desperation, asking for the strength to endure what was surely coming next. My end. It was at that moment that I clearly heard someone tell me to stand up, to turn around, and to run. I remember being startled for a second and thinking, did I just hear that? I know this might sound crazy, but I believe it was God giving me guidance, telling me what to do. I hadn't spoken to God in a very long time, so I didn't understand why he would be speaking to me at that moment, but I decided to listen. I turned completely around and ran into the woods. I can still feel the adrenaline. I can still see the trees and the forest floor in front of me. He chased me to the end of the forest, but he stopped when I broke through the tree line. In retrospect, had I run in any other direction, I would have been lost deeper into the woods. There was a house 200 yards away, and an older man and his wife who lived there cared for me until help arrived. But I was marked. I would never forget this moment in my life. My life was physically spared that day, but spiritually and emotionally, I was dead. I deeply questioned God's goodness. Although they apprehended and convicted my captor, I wouldn't relationally open up to anyone about what had happened to me that day. I thought that day had destroyed me. For 16 years, I thought I would never be a normal person with normal relationships and normal fears and normal expectations. For 20 years, I wouldn't ride a bicycle. The years following my incident were dark. I worked as a dancer and lived as a drug abuser. I was grasping for happiness around every corner, but because of the shame I had not dealt with, every attempt at becoming full ended empty. When I was 9 years old, I had given my life to the Lord, and even though I had turned my back on him, I couldn't shake the sense that he had never turned his back on me. In 1999, I was at a church and heard the message of Christ's love for me all over again. I became more aware of my hopelessness and vain attempts at finding paradise, so I surrendered my life to him anew. At that point, it felt as if things around me were slowly falling into place. I started regularly engaging with a church community. I found that I was happy a lot of the time for no particular reason. It's taken a lot of time, a lot of help, and a lot of trust. but I have experienced God's transforming restoration in my life. It's hard to explain. Every so often during my journey, I would feel God's pull even when I was in my darkest hours, especially when I was in my darkest hours. I believe that God had a plan for me. I've learned that you can turn your back on God, but God will never turn his back on you. There were points in my journey where I believed freedom would never be possible again. However, because of his grace and power, I have been given the courage to get back on the bike and keep pedaling. God's been using my story to create restoration in the lives of others as well. Next month marks the 22nd anniversary of the darkest day of my life. But it also marks the day God heard my cry and called me out of the pit.